also see the bones decay. I don't know what else there is to say. I'm doing my best not to run away. Sitting throwing rocks across the pavement, hoping it'll cave in and swallow me whole. Wondering how the world keeps on spinning, kinda scared of living when it unfolds. Hard to see the light when everything is silent, waiting for the clear. Thankful I'm alive, but terrified of dying. But hey, I'm still here. Is it bad sometimes? I like it when I lose control. There's something in it that's so beautiful. Listen, I can see the light today, but I can also see the bones decay. I don't know what else there is to say. I'm doing my best not to run away. You're the night sky trying to make me see your stars, but the dark gets so lonely. Now I see violet, I can feel silence in the dark.
Hello, we're just going to get Shawn up there, and then we'll start. Hopefully everyone on YouTube is doing okay. Shawn, you went invisible last time, and now I'm trying to get you back. There you are. Oh, look at that.
Looking fresh.
Make myself a little bit bigger. Sweet. There we go. We're all good. 3, 2, 1. Welcome into hardcore whoa. Not college football.
That's so 2019, Corey.
It's been a long day. All right. It's been a long day. Let me try that again. Wow. Welcome into hardcore Penn State football. Really excited show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about the 1947 Penn State season in depth. Before we do that, we have some top shelf Penn State news that we need to cover. But a lot of the focus will be on the 1947, which I promise you is a lot more interesting season than what you probably think it is. So very, very excited to talk about that. We'll finish the show with some fan questions. I think we have one, actually, and then a bold prediction or two, followed by the Penn State wide receiver draft, which is going to be highly contested, let me tell you. So a lot coming your way on this episode, everybody. Enjoy. Welcome to Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Corey Listoki. With me, as always, the great and strep throatless Shawn Kane.
Yes. How we doing, Corey?
Well, the fact that I barely got through those introductions,
Yeah.
not great, but no, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Happy to be back, as always, as we are in the dog days of February, Shawn.
We are indeed. And yeah, last week, I think I deserve some recognition. I got through the whole pod with strep throat. And now, to be clear, by Wednesday night, I was feeling much better. I got strep throat. It's one of the joys of being a substitute teacher is you get things like strep throat that you think you won't get when you pass like the age of 12. But I was unfortunate enough to get that. So what are you going to do? But
No,
other
I
than
had no
that,
idea though. I don't think anybody had an idea. You played it really well. So
yeah, by that time I was feeling good. If we recorded Tuesday night, I probably would have had to delay because my throat was killing me Tuesday night.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. I will say we didn't get any answer from Donnie Collins, but Joe Smeltzer went ahead and told everybody that I won the draft last week. And his word is God. So I don't want to brag, but I am now the first person or the first draft to successfully win the draft, according to Joe, by picking second. That's the first time that's happened so far in Hardcore Penn State football history.
Yeah, 2-2. We have
Big one
a
tonight.
very interesting draft tonight, and it's not going to be one for the faint of heart because there are going to be some really, really good names left off our lists. I have a feeling. I mean, just by looking at the list, there's no way we can include them all. So, yeah, it's going to be definitely not for the faint of heart. And there's going to be. I have a feeling this is really going to get some traction on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, I was surprised how little traction that the season openers got, but I mean, I know the players are always going to drive the most hype, but we did not get much love for the season openers. My one good friend, Donnie, not Donnie Collins, another Donnie, he was like, hey, I would take Texas Tech and Georgia Tech over Southern Miss. So I guess that was a slight win for you in that department.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have roughly 12 guys on my list right now for wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it goes down. We asked on Twitter for people that you don't think we should, leave off. And I thought to me that was pretty interesting who we got, who answered that. So I think people are going to be upset. I think they're going to be upset.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we've had a lot of good receivers here, especially. And the good thing about the list, like that I have that as compared to like the defensive line list, is I've seen a lot of these guys play, so I have an eye test that I'm able to utilize that I really wasn't as able to effectively use as I with the defensive line in particular, and even some of the quarterbacks. So I think that's going to help make the list even better for both of us.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. Most of them we have seen play, most of them. But okay, maybe I got 14 guys. For full disclosure, I didn't spend as much time on the receivers as I typically do in the drafts because I was focusing on the 1947 season. But I think I still got a pretty good list together.
Yep, same. I have a 15. So
I hadn't even really thought about it too much. So We'll see.
Ready to see what you got, Corey?
We'll see. Well, that'll be
Corey's
way later.
game is tonight, the 1947 season.
Yeah.
Corey
There's
has
nobody
been
from
talking about the 1947 season for 3 weeks now, so I am very intrigued, and the research was pretty cool. So I think we have a good
it's
show.
juicy. It's a juicy season.
Yep.
We'll get to that we'll get to the season in just a second. We'll get to the draft at the end of the show tonight. So we'll get to that in a second. I will throw up the show schedule. I don't know why that one always trips me up, but it does. The show schedule. There we go. I don't have a huge recruiting update, Sean. So we might talk a little bit about that. Deep dive into Penn State 1947, not 1948. Wow. Just butchered that right off the bat. Fan questions. We got one and we got 2 bold predictions. And I do have a question for you, Sean, actually.
Ooh.
So, and I'm pretty sure that was a question I had last week that I forgot about. So I'm pretty happy that I remembered. And then we'll finish with the wide receiver draft. If you're on YouTube watching us, please say hi. And last episode, we had a lot of people chime in. So hopefully we started late. So hopefully those people didn't go find better things to do. But that is what we are going to start with. Sean, top shelf news. I know we no longer have a PSU in the NFL segment, but PSU in the XFL. I think XFL starts in like a week, roughly.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. I'm thinking, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm going to be the XFL dude. I will say, if you really care about the XFL, friend of the show, Maddie Fresh, has a new show. I think it's every Thursday night they're going to do it. I don't even know what it's called, but I can find out for you in a second. But I think it's just every Thursday. Maybe it's a couple times a week. I'm not really sure. Maddie Fresh is on, Instagram, Twitter. You can find him pretty easily. But he, obviously a Penn State fan, very big XFL guy. Even back before COVID when it was started, he was a huge XFL guy. So they're calling it Spring Ball Boulevard. And starts tomorrow on YouTube. So if you're interested in the XFL, obviously I'm sure it's going to be geared a little bit towards Penn Staters. Those are the guys right there. Robert Windsor with Vegas. John Lovett, blast from the past with Vegas. Sharif Miller, Michael Mennett with Seattle, and Steve Gonzalez with St. Louis. So those are the guys that made the 53-man roster for the XFL. Sean, your back-breaking, lukewarm takes with the XFL.
So Steven Gonzalez, I once rode next to him on the cattle bus. He is a large man. I'm a pretty big man myself, but he dwarfed me. Just a little fun fact for you. So yes, I will not be the XFL expert.
No,
I will not. Spring football, it just never really caught on for me. Really never caught on nationwide, but supposedly this is going to be a pretty well-funded league. I think this is the one that The Rock is backing. They've had some crossover with the WWE back in the day, and I think they do now as well. And yeah, it's good to see these guys still playing football because there's some talent there. Like Sharif Miller, I'm kind of surprised he didn't materialize in the NFL. I don't know if the Eagles were the right fit for him for a few different reasons. Windsor, one of my, a real grinder. He seems like he'd be on the Gruden's grinder section of the Monday Night Football back when John Gruden was still broadcasting. And Michael Mennett was really, I thought, an underrated center for us, or underrated player. So yeah, it's cool to see these guys still getting a paycheck, still playing football, and still chasing their dream.
Yeah, you were spitting facts there.
Which one in particular?
I think you can figure it out.
Yeah, I think so too.
Man, I was waiting to say that all day. It's gonna let it materialize for people in the podcast for a second. Moving on. Should pop up in a second. I wanted to discuss before we get to the number updates. I wanted to give a shout out to tight end Khalil Dinkins. He has won whatever shout out that he gets from the tight ends coach, Ty Howell. He's won that, like, he's won a workout 3 times in a row. So wanted to give a shout out to Khalil Dinkins. That tight end room, Shawn, very, very full. I'm really thinking Jerry Cross, Khalil Dinkins, like this is their year. If they don't figure it out now, like Schlafer, and why am I forgetting the other guy right now?
Rapplier.
Yes, thank you, Rapplier. Rapplier, they say might already be ready to. So you kind of have to be wondering if this is the moment. Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy for Khalil Dinkins and Jerry Cross. Like this, if you want to make that, and apparently they've done well so far. But I just wanted to give him some love there.
Well, I mean, Cross is what, can be a redshirt freshman?
One of them's a redshirt freshman, one of them's a redshirt sophomore, right?
Yeah, I think Cross is the younger guy. And, Dinkins, I liked what I saw from him when he played this year, but it's just going to be the question of, is that going to be good enough to hold Rapplier off? Because I think Schlaffer's probably going to be the guy who redshirts, but Rapplier will be the guy who has a chance to contribute early. So, yeah, it's good to have good competition there for that third tight end spot.
Yep. Before I get to the wide receiver numbers, I'm just going to leave them up there so people have time to look at it. But I wanted to also say that former wide receiver coach Jared Parker was hired at Notre Dame as the offensive coordinator. Actually, you're the one that pointed it out to us, but we thought that was an interesting hire. Everyone else is kind of agreeing with us. We think that's sort of an underwhelming hire. They were trying to get the Utah offensive coordinator, and I do not know his name, but I guess there's like a $2.8 million buyout, and I guess that was too steep for Notre Dame. That's just what the rumors were. First of all, I don't know who the Utah offense coordinator is, but nothing stood out to me in the Utah game where I was like, yeah, this is a guy you need to like desperately go get. So I don't know. I don't know what Notre Dame, if they were going to go to the Utah offense coordinator and then their backup was Jared Parker, I just want to know what they were really thinking because it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure you're not really upset with it, Shawn.
I am not. I'm not upset with them being cheapskates, but that's what they are. You could ask Notre Dame fans that, like, they are, and you're not gonna compete for national championships being cheap. And really, even hiring Marcus Freeman, and I like Marcus Freeman, but Notre Dame's not the type of job for on the job training in my mind. And you're gonna cheap out now on the other side of the ball where Freeman's not Freeman's forte is not an offense, it's on defense. And it seems like a good opportunity to bring in someone with, a bunch of experience, a Mike Yurcich type hire, and you hired Jared Parker. I mean, hey, man, whatever. Good luck to you.
Could have got, well, I guess they couldn't have anymore, but they could have tried to get Bill O'Brien.
They could have, but that would have meant paying for him.
And he had the O'Brien name. That would have been perfect for Notre Dame. I don't want to talk about it very much, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that Georgia because a lot of people assume Penn State's going to be in a playoff. I don't know if we assume that yet, but if they would just happen to play at Georgia, they will be with a different offensive coordinator. Todd Monken went to the NFL, take the Ravens job, who at one point we thought Joe Moorhead was maybe in the running for, although I don't know how serious that really was. They replaced Todd Monken with a sort of polarizing hire in Mr. Mike Bobo. And if you're wondering if you've heard that name before, Mike Bobo was the offensive coordinator with Auburn when Penn State played Auburn the first time. And he was at South Carolina. He was head coach at Colorado State. I mean, he's been around. He was actually at Georgia as the offensive coordinator back in like the Aaron Murray, Matthew Stafford days. So he's been around there before. He was an offensive analyst before he just got promoted. Josh Pate will tell you it's a good hire. And he said it's a good hire solely because of the loyalty aspect of it. And you know what you're getting with him if you're Kirby Smart. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, although that might be true, I think it's a pretty safe hire as far as not really – we just talked about going out and getting Marcus Hagans for Penn State and how that was an improvement, right? That wasn't a settling for Stubblefield. I think Kirby Smart, at the very least, you could say, kind of settled for Mike Bobo. Whether or not that's going to make a difference at the end of the day, who knows, right? They're getting 4 or 5-star guys left and right. Maybe it won't make a difference. Be pretty impressive if Mike Bobo is able to screw that offense up that quickly. But again, you kind of wonder, was there maybe someone else out there that could have made the Georgia offense even better? Because, yeah, they've won back-to-back national championships, but it's not like they've done it because they've had an outrageously explosive offense. And now maybe that's just because of Stenson Bennett, who knows? But, I mean, they've won because of their defense, more or less. So, Shawn, thoughts there real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that Josh Pate has that take because, yeah, he's loyal, but he's mediocre. I don't really get it. And yes, their success has been primarily due to their defense. And yes, I know they put up 66 in the title game, but their bread and butter is defense. Defense keeps them in the game. Defense dominates the game, and the offense has to score enough to win the game. And that's kind of the way they do it, and they're very, very successful at it. But in modern college football, a great defense is only going to take you so far, and you're going to have games in the playoff like they played against Ohio State where you're going to have to put up 38, 42 points occasionally. That's just the way it goes if you want to win a national championship. And Mike Bobo was very underwhelming at Auburn. And I don't know if he's really, I don't really get it. I mean, I guess the loyalty aspect is there. And maybe they think, well, he has all this 5-star talent. He'll be able to figure it out, and we won't have to worry about hiring a new offensive coordinator next year. I guess that's the logic, but I'm just not sure I necessarily agree with it. And Georgia, they're not a cheap program at all.
No.
So it's a little puzzling to me why they would go in that direction. But hey, sure, okay.
Mike Bobo
plays them. Mike. I'm not going to be sweating bullets about Mike Bobo.
No, Mike Bobo, same guy who decided to run on 4th and goal, that goal line fade against Jaquan Brisker in that Auburn game. So
yeah,
he didn't even make it the whole season, I don't think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was
happy to see that goal, I'm sorry. You know what he did? He got fired right after the Alabama game. That's right. Remember it now. Two other things I want to mention. I'm sorry, before we get to the numbers. Naeem Wortman-White taking the defensive line coach job at Akron. So he's joining not just Joe Moorhead there, but Billy Fessler there. So kind of like a 20. Well, was Wortman-White there in 2016?
Yeah, he got hurt against Temple.
That's right. I get my year. I don't know if that was 2015 or 2016. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, he gave that speech at halftime.
Yeah. So a big 2016 reunion in Akron, Ohio.
Yeah, you gotta love it. And yeah, Naeem, he was at New Hampshire, I believe. He was the defensive line coach there, so that's a step up. He's coaching a D1 team. He's coaching a D1 team now, and it's just another guy that's there that graduated from Penn State that we could keep in mind for the future. So happy to see Naeem. He's also another guy from the 570. He went to Valley View High School, so where I substitute teach. So yeah, that's awesome to hear for Naeem.
Close to home there. Finally, Shawn, a little conspiracy for you on this Wednesday on February 15th.
Ohio State UFOs over Canada?
No, although it might be related. I don't know. And that is Ohio State canceling their 2024 matchup with Washington. Now, this just happened not that long ago. Maybe there's been a clarification on why, but I'm just going to theorize and just tell you, why would they cancel this? Unless maybe, Shawn, it's because they might be playing Washington as a conference game in 2024. Bum, bum, bum. I don't know, but I haven't heard why yet. And it is kind of weird for that to happen. So Which again, just remind everybody, why do we schedule games 10 years out when you can just cancel them on a whim? It just seems like, why are we doing it this way?
Dumbest thing in sports.
But so yeah, I don't know why yet, but it's interesting. We talked a little realignment last week, and it just seems like things are happening in the shadows, Shawn. Like things haven't necessarily maybe surfaced besides the SMU and San Diego State stuff, but I feel like the Big Ten kind of moving behind the shadows a little bit, moving in the alleyways, kind of like a creeper.
Yeah, so when USC and UCLA bailed on the Pac-12 and came here, we covered it. And at the time, with all these realignments, everybody kind of thinks it's going to happen all at once. And we told everybody then, this is probably going to be it until after the football season's over. And we were right. So that's kind of because this is how it happens. To move these pieces, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And yeah, we were negotiating the TV contract at the time. And part of that was we were trying to get the LA market so the Big Ten would get more money. And then everybody was like, why is the TV contract taking so long? And it was because of that. So there's all kinds of stuff happening behind the scenes. I don't know if it's because Washington's coming, but could play a role. And if they're not coming, we have an opening in 2025, so I wouldn't play Washington.
You know who else has an opening the same week that Ohio State does now in 2024? Georgia. Just saying.
That'd be cool.
Georgia Ohio State game. Wouldn't be opposed to that on like September 13th, I think. Yeah, okay. Now we can talk about the numbers. If you're on the podcast, you're like, what are you talking about, Corey? Penn State updated numbers, including transfer portal, including the 2023 class early enrollees, and some of the guys that decided to change numbers. I'm going to run through these warp speed, but they are, I think, Blue and White Illustrated posted them first. But they're going to be on our Instagram as well. I haven't posted yet, but they'll be on our Instagram in a jiffy. Or you can just check them out on YouTube real quick. And while you're here, like the video. Okay, 2023 class. Here we go. Tip of the tongue of the teeth of the lips. Zion Tracy, cornerback, number 12. Love that number, by the way. Linebacker Tony Rojas, number 13. Love that number. Quarterback Jackson Smolik, number 14. Don't love that number, but I'm glad Drew Aller didn't get it. Cornerback Elliott Washington, number 16. Thought was kind of interesting, Shawn. Tight end Joey Schlaffer, going with Jesse James's number 18. Linebacker Tamir Robinson, number 24. Cornerback Lamont Payne, number 27. Alex Berkmeyer, number 63. Anthony Donka, number 68. Javen Williams, offensive lineman, number 70. And tight end / maybe eventually one day offensive tackle, but for now tight end, Mega Barnwell, number 85, and maybe defensive player, Mega Barnwell. Number switches. Blue White Illustrated had 81 for Liam Clifford, but I'm like 99% sure he was 82 last year.
He was.
Yeah, I thought that was just a fat finger by whoever was over there. But that's why I QC, Shawn. That's why I don't just copy and paste stuff on here. I double check things. Just like how I put the 1948 deep dive instead of 1947.
That's why we're paid the big bucks here.
Yes, absolutely. Number switches. Wide receiver Liam Clifford, 82 to number 2. So he's just getting rid of the 80. Liam. His name should be Liam Clifford. That sounds cooler.
Liam.
There
was a teacher who there was a kid in my class named Liam. And there's a teacher who pronounced his name Yam. She had a bit of an accent. It was funny.
Kind of remind me of like the Key and Peele skit there. Aaron.
Aaron, yeah.
Wide receiver Omari Evans switching his number from 18 to number 5. So we'll have Jahan Dotson number 2 on the way. Offensive tackle. This is an interesting one to me because Caden Wallace has been around for a while. So, like, I get the freshman switching because, like, maybe their number was taken. But Caden Wallace has been around for a long time. But he's switching his number from 79 to 73. So, Interesting. This one was also interesting, Sean. Xander Sahadak, kicker, changing his number from 93 to number 94. Just really, I mean, a huge increase there. And then this is actually kind of a big one. Jalen Reed changing his number from number 7 to number 1. So he's getting rid of like the horizontal part of his number. He's just going to keep the single little stick, but going to get rid of the horizontal part.
Yeah.
And then finally, the new transfer players. Storm Duck is going to be number 2. So I guess Storm Duck and Liam Clifford won't be playing special teams at the same time. Wide receiver Malik McClain will be taking sticks, number 11. So I guess Malik McClain and Abdul Carter won't be on the field at the same time. Riley Thompson, the new punter from not FSU, what Florida
FAU.
School? FAU, thank you. Number 95, and then Alex Felkins from Columbia will be number 91.
Yeah, very nice. So we have Jalen Reed emulating Jaquan Brisker. Liam Clifford maybe emulating a Derek Williams, and Caden Wallace emulating Mike Miranda.
Lord, that's bad. You got me on the Clifford Derek Williams one. That one.
Not Mike Miranda.
Liam Clifford with the Derek Williams comparison. Those are the updates for you. Those aren't going to be all of the updates because Blue and White Illustrated did point this out. Right now, Christian Driver, who switched over from safety to wide receiver, has the same number as Katron Allen, number 13. So one of them is going to have to switch numbers if they both want to play. So we will have to wait and see on that one. That's all the top shelf news I have, Sean.
Katron Allen's not going to switch his number, right? I mean, 13, you just don't see it as a running back number much, so it's kind of unique.
Yeah, I mean, if he would have switched, maybe he would have taken number 2 or something like that. I'm trying to think. Well, what number 3 is available, isn't it? Now that Parker Washington's gone.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, you can take 3.
Go from 13 to 3, just cut it off like Omari Evans did with not with Omari Evans, like Clifford did with the 80s.
Right. My question is why, and I kind of wondered it when Clifford was here too. Why do quarterbacks keep taking 14? It's like the kiss of death number.
Also, and this isn't related to what you said.
And I know Schaefer and Blackledge won championships, but I mean, I don't know. No. Schaefer was mostly awful.
Yeah, Blackledge is really the only
Blackledge was the only great quarterback to have one.
I want to also say, I wonder if for freshmen that make impacts their first year, if they'll be more reluctant to change their number just because of the name, image, and likeness and the recognition people already have with that number, right? I wonder if that's going to play a bigger role. That's something that people probably haven't thought about as much, but I think it's a decent point. I have one more thing to show you, Sean, before we start the 1947 deep dive. And it doesn't really fit into the graphic very well. But if you're looking on YouTube, this is one of the reasons why you should watch the show on YouTube. I have up there, this is from, I don't know, College Football Geeks, I don't know, CFB numbers, I don't know. It's on YouTube, it gives credit to where credit's due. Draft pick value average from 2012 to 2022. These are one of those graphs where you want to be top right is the very best and bottom left is the worst. On the horizontal axis, you have offensive value for draft picks, and on the y-axis, you have defensive player for best value. And surprisingly, Penn State actually lands in the, I don't know what quadrant number that would be, but it would be the southeast quadrant. I don't know. Is that 1, 2, 3, or 4? I don't know how they label quadrants left to right. Is it 1, 2, 3? Is it fourth quadrant? I don't know. But
I always struggle with this portion of math.
But it's bottom right square, which means they had an above average offensive production draft pick value wise, but technically just slightly below the average on the defensive draft pick value wise in the last 10 years, which to me is a little surprising. I guess not if you think about like what Saquon and Miles and I guess Gesicki and I guess what Godwin and Dotson have been able to do. And I don't know how they valued for like Ryan Bates or a Connor McGovern or Pat Fryermuth I should throw in there too. I don't know how they value for all that. But I'm just thinking moving forward, like Micah Parsons, Jaquan Brisker, I don't know. Maybe there's just not as much. I don't know. But I think it's something worth paying attention to moving forward.
Well, I mean, in the Franklin era, there's only been 2 defensive guys drafted in the first round, right? I think it's only been Micah and Odafe. So kind of makes sense. There's
Forgot
been
about OA.
Yeah, Owe. And then, I mean, the third highest pick guy was Brisker, and Brisker slipped. Brisker slipped into the like 40s or 50s, which, I mean, if everybody just listened to us, we were like, draft Brisker, draft Brisker, draft Brisker. He's going to be really good.
I didn't get any. I thought I was going to get a huge amount of appraisal for. I don't even know who came out with the draft prospect or inquiry on Jair Brown, but they had him as a fringe day 2 guy, but then they had him as the number 5 safety, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, just go back and look at the last draft. I think 3 or 4 guys were taken in the first round, and then 3 more were taken in the second round. So if you're 5th best safety, being fringe day 2 just doesn't make any sense. And then B, the 5 guys he had ahead of him, I was like, no. Like there's maybe 2 or 3 you could really argue, and that was about it. I couldn't even tell you the name. The one guy's from Alabama, one guy's from LSU, but then after that, I'm not really sure who they're seeing. So I didn't agree with that, but no one else seemed to really. That didn't pick up any traction when I said that was Barnacles. So I guess I don't know. Maybe people just missed it.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, from what I've seen, it's kind of a weak safety draft. Where last year was a pretty strong safety draft. Last year there was Daxton Hill, there was Kyle Hamilton, Brisker. So it felt like it was a bit of a stronger safety class last year. This year it's not so much. Like Bruce Branch from Alabama is top guy, but I don't think he's as good as Hamilton was. And after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. So yeah, I think Jair Brown is a guy that, if he tests well, you could see him sneak up the boards a little bit. And I think the only thing that teams are going to hold against him is tackling. And I mean, tackling's pretty important if you're safety, but I don't think he's necessarily a bad tackler. But I do know that there are some missed tackles on film that teams are going to hold against him.
Yeah. I get it, but you know how I feel about it.
I do. We love Tig here.
I want to make sure I have this set up before we start. If you're on YouTube, you're wondering what the heck is going on right now, but it's okay. I got some old film for you guys.
Sean Clifford's high school highlights.
Shawn Clifford. Yeah, exactly. Not exactly, but it was fun. I'm going to shout out whoever I need to shout out. But as far as giving credit where credit's due before we start, any other news before we get into the 1947 season? I know you're just jumping at the bit to get started.
Not that I could think of off the top of my head. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Like you said, these are the dog days. It was funny to see Notre Dame hire Gerard Parker, as we talked about. But yeah, that's really about it. It's been pretty slow in Happy Valley. Has there been? I don't think there's really much going on. Like, if the coaches are going to take a vacation anytime in their life, it feels like this is the time to do it.
On.
Oh, it's on this weekend?
I don't know. Soon.
Okay, yes, Don's going on. So, yeah, you're right. It's the middle of February, so it might be this weekend.
Penn State basketball.
Did you ever do anything for that?
No.
I didn't either.
Not against it or anything. Just not my cup of tea.
I just never Never did it. And yeah,
Christoph
Penn
says
State basketball was victorious last night after losing every game for like a month. So that was nice to see.
Christoph confirms that it is this weekend. So thank you, Christoph, on YouTube.
Awesome.
Valued listener on YouTube. We appreciate it. Okay, enough yipping yapping. Let's talk 1947 football. And I just don't think people quite like. So let me just start this by saying you should be on YouTube to watch this, by the way, because I got a couple pictures here. I got some clips of some game footage. You should just watch it on YouTube, honestly. But it's okay if you're on the podcast. But you're gonna want to go back and, I don't know, at least click through some of these pictures. Before we start, I just want to say, PennLive, Joe Hermit, I got pictures or two from him. Lou Prado, Penn State historian, goat amongst goats. Like, if you're trying to classify someone as a goat, like Lou fits into that. Actually, fun fact, I don't know, I haven't been to a Penn State hockey game for a long time, but when I used to go, I used to sit in my grandparents' seats, and their seats were right next to Lou Prado. And I used to sit next to him for like every hockey game when I was in school, because I didn't sit in the student section. I just sat in my grandparents' seat. So I sat next to Lou for like, I want to say I sat next to him for probably at least 20 hockey games, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's a bank of information.
He is. So that was sweet. But that guy knows everything about anything called Penn State football related. A couple other sources out there. Penn State Encyclopedia, we got a couple pictures from. Big shout out to Amy and Mark, who work at Washington State. They're the ones that had film of the 1947 Washington State Penn State game. Fun fact: when in the recent licensing agreement with the Pac-12 network, which is kind of baloney in my opinion, universities had to give up their rights to that film to the Pac-12. So although they gave me the film and they gave me the rights to it, they said it's not technically theirs anymore. It's the Pac-12's rights. And I think that's kind of sucky, to be honest with you. I feel like that stuff should stay with, I think there should be an expiration date on that stuff, and then it just goes back to the university. I will say this. I never realized how important those people's jobs are, not just at Washington State, but at Penn State. Because you guys we have seen those simulations we've done for Penn State. I plan on doing more of those with older Penn State teams where the depth charts aren't as clear. And Penn State has helped me tremendously with getting me some of those depth charts. And we talked about the 1959 roster before. But those people, I don't know exactly what they do all day, but they have that information ready, locked, and loaded whenever someone asks for it, which is just extraordinary. And it's a piece of history. I like history, and I just think it's important that we have people like that, and B, I think it's fantastic that they're always. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter where you go in the country. I feel like those people are always the same. Like, they're always eager to help, and so that's just my shout out to them. I literally reached out to him today at like 3:00, and he got me the film, which is pretty sweet. So, thank you to
awesome.
Mark. Marco English is his full name. So thank you to him. 1947 season, Shawn. I mentioned it. I teased it a little bit last week. We were originally going to do just a breakdown about, I almost said Wally Richardson, Wally Triplett, and Denny Hogard, as far as what they were able to accomplish in that 1948 Cotton Bowl and the significance of it, and the potential of the beginning of the We Are. Although, as you probably did in your research, the We Are chant didn't really start until 1970s. Did you find, by the way, that the old cheer, like the NITTANY, used to be like the cheer they did all the time? It sounded awful.
I did not see that. Now, I did know that the We Are chant, it's disputed when it started, because, we're going to get into it at a team meeting. They said We Are Penn State, and supposedly that's when it started. So it's a little disputed. I did not know that there was a chant before that. I thought we would say something like you would say in the 50s, like rah, rah, go State or something. You know how every chant was rah, rah.
Let's bring back rah. Anyway,
we could say rah, rah, Penn State.
I'm going to show some film later about a Penn State cheerleader that I found in this Washington State Penn State film, and it's going to, I mean, I think I'm going to die with laughter when you see it because it is something else. But we'll get to that in a second. But what I was getting at was there's just too much in the 1947 season just to do a 10-minute thing on. So I don't know. This might be 20 minutes long. This might be 30 minutes long. This might be just 18 minutes long. I'm not really sure. But I really think Lou Prado calls it arguably the greatest Penn State team of all time. And that's for a couple different reasons. Not just a maturity thing. It's a talent thing too, at least back in their time period. And I guess let's just go into it. So as you can see there's a 1947 squad. A lot of people think this is the first time Penn State had African Americans on their team, and it was for the varsity squad, but they did have two brothers, the Alston brothers, that were on their junior varsity team prior to this. So although they were Wally Triplett and Denny Hoger were the first on the varsity squad, there were previous African Americans on a Penn State roster before this. I want to set this up by saying kind of where Penn State football is at this point. I don't want to say they're irrelevant because from what I understood was that, I mean, people knew who Penn State football was, but at this point they'd only been to one bowl game and they hadn't really done a whole, like, people regionally knew about them, but I don't think anybody was considering them to be a national power anytime soon. And I don't want to say the 1947 season was the beginning of greatness, but I would argue that, Shawn, that the 1947 season, and honestly the next 3 years under Bob Higgins, and then led to what to what Ingle was able to do, Rip Ingle, that is, by the way, what he was able to do, then led into Joe Paterno era, which made Penn State into a household name. But I really think you got to give a lot of credit to what Bob Higgins did. Bob Higgins played at Penn State in the I have it here, 1914 to 1917. Then he went to World War I. Then he came back and played again in 1919, which is, by the way, by a stretch is just awesome, right? That we're talking about World War I and college football together. But this dude, he coached a couple different places. He finished his career at Penn State. He coached 3 more years after the 1947 season. And I couldn't figure out what illness it was, but he said he had to step down because of an illness. Would still be the PE teacher at Penn State until 1951, until he retired. And he helped out with the team, but he stopped being the head coach, I believe, in 1949-ish. But he didn't do very many good positive things up to the 1947 team, but he was moving them in the right direction. And I think it kind of culminated with the 1947 squad. And it was a schedule, Shawn, that was nationally renowned, right? I mean, you're talking about, I don't know if you'd necessarily call them heavy hitters, but I mean, this schedule is, I mean, they weren't really afraid to go out and play some teams. I mean, to start the season against Washington State, they get Bucknell, Fordham. Those are kind of easy. Syracuse, not necessarily a great team, but as far as history goes, a good team. West Virginia, very regionally important game. Colgate, nothing crazy there. At Temple was one of their closest games. Navy obviously had some good teams back then. And then they finished the year at Pittsburgh. If you go back and look at some of their schedules, they went out and played some teams, Shawn. And I think, you know, when we're trying to remember Bob Higgins and what he did for Penn State, not just in the 1947 season, I mean, it seemed like this guy was like, hey, I want to play. I don't care where, I don't care who, but I want to go out and play. And I think in the long run that helped out this program.
Yeah, and you know, the thing with Penn State back in the day, like even way back to the 40s, is Penn State struggled to get respect nationally, even when Joe was there in the beginning. And it's because we were seen as a Northeast team, and people kind of just thought of us as like a glorified Boston College. And it didn't matter how much we won and how much we would go out and try to play these other teams. That's just kind of how people saw us. And that was the same way until probably the mid 70s. And yeah, you know, Higgins, we would have played so we didn't play a bowl. This was their first bowl game too, in 20 some years. So back then it was tougher to make a bowl. The lawnmower bowl didn't exist back then, so it was a big deal to make a bowl in general. And we went and we tied a really good SMU team. But yeah, this schedule, it was, we went out, played Washington State, crushed Washington State out at Hershey Park. Speaking of Hershey Park, have you ever been there, Corey?
I have been to Hershey Park, and as far as I can tell, Shawn, I mentioned this on the last episode, but I want to reiterate. I believe that besides the blue and white game that was there, I believe Penn State has never played against someone in a football game at Hershey Park. So I believe this is the only time that ever happened.
How about that?
And the only reason it happened was because State House people were like, hey, we got a lot of people want to go to this game. They were going to have it at New Beaver Field. They're like, no, you need to move it. And they moved it. I think I have the number here. 16,000 people were in attendance for that game. And interestingly enough, we'll get to that game more in a second because I have some video clips, but Penn State wore white.
How about that?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you could consider it a neutral site game because they wore white, and in all the schedules that I see, it doesn't say Washington State at Penn State. It says Washington State versus Penn State. So interesting enough there. I want to ask you, Shawn, too. And by the way, I have it up on YouTube. Those are the 5 coaches there. 5 coaches for an entire team. It's just funny to me, Shawn, when you think about now how big the staff is. Not just the coaches themselves, but the recruiting and the support and the athletic and the training. And I mean, it's just funny, like looking back, like, yep, there are 5 dudes coaching this whole team. I think that's funny.
Yeah, man, things change.
They ran a single wing offense, which again, we'll get to some clips here in a second. 5-3-3 defense, Shawn. I love it.
The bear front.
Over the course of the season, I'm not kidding you. This is, to me, when you look at like crazy statistics, like Penn State 1947 holds a lot of them because their defense was one of the best of all time. And that's not even an exaggeration. Even against, I don't care that they weren't going against the teams that threw the ball a bunch. Like what they did defensively, I don't care if they ran every play. This defense was impressive. They had 6 shutouts. They shut out Bucknell. They beat Fordham 75-0. They shut out Syracuse. They shut out Colgate. They shut out Temple, and they shut out Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. They averaged allowing 17 rushing yards per game against Syracuse, Shawn. This is in rushing yards. This is total yards. They allowed negative 47 yards to Syracuse. I don't think that's ever going to be broken. Like, how do you break that?
That's one of those unbreakable records.
It's on. They only. This is the nuts to me too. Like you can say, oh, back then all they did was run the ball. Okay, well, if teams all they did back then was run the ball, Penn State only allowed 153 rushing yards the entire season.
Yeah, that's man.
It's blasphemous. I mean, it's just unreal. I mean, I'll get to some film. Like I guess we can go film now, actually. But it's just like. They run every play, and it does not matter. And here we go. So if you're on podcasts, I highly recommend you switching over YouTube at some point just so you can see some of these clips. I'm just going to verbally show you kind of what I see here. Let me get this to loop so it doesn't do that on us. Both teams did this, Shawn. So this is a pooch punt, but watch the quarterback like last second back up and then just take the snap and punt it away. Also, I don't think they had roughing the punter back then, at least from what I could tell there. But I love that play. And let me see if I can show you. Washington State ran the trot line formation, a lot of T formation, and this is them trying to throw out of it with a little jump pass that was picked off by Penn State.
Yeah, that was very poorly executed.
Yeah. Washington
State just threw it into a mass of humanity.
Yeah, they love the little pop passes. Now they would motion out this wing back into like a wide receiver set, but they'd keep him actually behind the other running back. So he was actually still in the backfield, which I thought was pretty interesting. It wasn't very effective, but it was interesting nonetheless.
And I think if he just held on to the ball a little longer, that guy on the left might have gotten open. Like
I love we're film breaking down
Yeah,
1947 Washington State. Okay, this was a crazy. I don't know who the offense coordinator was in 1947 for Penn State, but look at this play. It's a direct snap to whomever, and this guy actually throws it down the field. I mean, this is just look at that.
Boom.
I saw that play and I was like, that is like some pretty. Everyone just like tries to say back then they just ran it up the gut 3 times and punted it. I mean, there was some really awesome play design going on here. That was one of my favorite ones. They ran a lot of misdirection. I mean, that was the name of the game. Wing T, single wing, all that stuff was a lot of misdirection stuff. Here's one of those reverses. Big gain down the left side there. It's hard. The only thing that's hard to tell is you can't really see the numbers very well here. But look at them carrying out that fake 15 yards down the field. This one right here went for a touchdown. Look at the good blocking downfield. Look at that. And then look at the cameraman blinding everybody.
Did you see the cheerleader? He threw that thing way up in the air.
Just wait.
Look how high it gets.
Okay. But do you see what you just said there, Shawn? Did you notice something?
What?
You said cheerleader.
Yeah, he's a cheerleader, right?
Yeah. But here's my thing, as I will show you more in a second.
Yo, my guy's flipping out over that.
Yeah. From what I can understand, you segued me perfectly. It's a single cheerleader, Shawn. They only got one. Penn State's only got one cheerleader.
It is a male cheerleader.
Yes.
And he is
the only one.
losing his mind.
I literally took this clip because I saw the same thing. And I was like, I want to focus in on this. It's literally just one dude. And he carries the game. The entire game, he's like this. But, I mean, it's just one dude. So I'm like, I looked. I could not find any documentation from the 1947 cheerleading squad. I don't know who this dude is, but if anyone can find out, I'm very interested in who this guy is. Is this the origin of the Penn State cheerleading squad? I don't know. And more importantly, I mean, 1947, I'm assuming there's got to be some stigma behind being a cheerleader at that point. And this dude doesn't care. I mean, he's carrying the squad again by himself. Very impressed. And like I said, I looked it up. I couldn't find anything on this guy. Thought you'd like that one. All right, let's go look at some defense here. This is a little sweet play they try to run, and this is why the Penn State defense. I mean, the guy just threw himself in there. I loved it. This is why and this is the first game of the year, so like the defense only really got better from here. But yeah, I mean they just swarmed him there. I got a couple more. This one I think. Okay, look how he throws his ball. It's going to be a little play action boot, or I don't even know if it's play action. But why does he jump past that? It ends up being a touchdown. And I love the cameraman flashing really is incredibly hard to see. I love the PAT too. The little one-step drop. But watch how he jumps. Ready? And jump. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway. There's the guy over there again, cheerleading pretty happily. I also like the official behind the kicker giving the confirmation of the field goal being good as well. Something you don't necessarily, and also the distance. I feel like they're further back from the offensive line for the field goal. Like I feel like he's kicking from further back, which I thought was kind of cool. What else do I got here? Okay, this one is just barnacles to me, Shawn. Just absolutely barnacles. Watch the cameraman on the far left screen or on top of your screen. This dude is on the field taking pictures. You're muted, by the way.
If that happened today, I feel like Twitter would find out who the guy is and completely ruin his life. They'd be like, "Oh, this guy's trying to blind our players."
If you're listening on the podcast, just to give you an idea, this cameraman is on the field taking pictures, and this is old school pictures. Like it's a large, it's like the
He
solar
runs out on the
eclipse.
field.
He's on the field and he takes his picture and like completely blinds half of the stadium with his flash. I mean, it's remarkable. I'm just thinking of Joe Hermit when I saw this picture. When I saw this video.
That would be Joe back then.
As far as the jump pass by the quarterback goes, Christoph says Pat Mahomes of 1947. That got me pretty good there. Elwood Petrel was the quarterback, Christoph, if you were curious. He actually, in the West Virginia game, which I want to talk about a little bit later, he actually throws a 49-yard touchdown pass to Wally Triplett. So Petrel did some pretty solid things. I mean, he could boogie a little bit. He could throw the ball pretty well. Fran Rogel was the main tailback. He got a lot of yards on the ground there. I do have one more. This is a Wally Triplett. I got two more here, it looks like. Oh yeah, look at this. This is the shotgun reverse, which I didn't think they ran a lot of. Or yeah. So they go direct snap and then they go reverse on it, which I thought was crazy. Look, I mean, boom. I just didn't know they were running stuff like that in the 40s, but I mean, they pull a guard and everything. I mean, it's beautiful. So I thought that was worth sharing. And then,
yeah, like you said, they really emphasize the misdirection a lot. And when you're running stuff out of these wing formations, you have to be creative, or else it is going to look like the same three plays over and over.
This is indeed Wally Triplett with the catch here. So I wanted to show this one just to give Wally Triplett some love for himself. This was 100% to him. I don't know how. I think I was able to zoom in. I could see the 12 on him. But look at the quarterback stance, just kind of hanging out there, throwing off his back foot, finds Triplett.
Love it.
If you guys, I have it's on YouTube. The game itself is on YouTube. The link's in the description. You guys can go look at the whole video if you want. It's like 21 minutes long. I found it interesting. That's why we actually started late today, because I was so busy looking at this stuff. There's that pooch punt one more time. But I don't know, Shawn. It was fun to watch the game. It made it a lot. I really resonated with this whole story once I got to see the film. I was like, this is really cool. So I know it's February, but we're still doing film breakdown here at Hardcore Penn State Football. So I bet no one else is talking and showing 1947 film on any other Penn State podcast this week.
Yeah, probably not. And God, I mean, I hope that, it would be awesome too if there's, and I'm sure there are people, still around from the 47 team. If you happen to know anybody, show them that we're consciously going through and honoring them and talking about maybe the first grade team ever at Penn State.
Yeah.
Because it's just not well known. Like, people know Wally Triplett, but they don't know the full story.
No, right. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I was ignorant to it too until I talked about it. I wanted to talk West Virginia. It was one of the more important games. They won 21-14. Largest home crowd in 22 years, excuse me. Apparently there were fistfights on the field. I think that was a PennLive article that said that. And I tried to find other sources of that, and I could not find any, Shawn. So I would love to know who was fighting who on the field or in the crowd. But I wasn't able to find anything additional. Oh, actually, before I show this picture, did I not? Oh, I might not have added that picture, unfortunately. I had a picture of the West Virginia game itself. Maybe if you guys just hang out with me, I can get that. But I thought the West Virginia game was one of those games, Shawn. If I could go back in time, it wouldn't probably. Maybe that's a good draft question. Like, if you go back in time to like a Penn State football moment that you weren't at, or it weren't even, that you would get to see in person, what would it be? I think that could be a good potential draft question.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that would be, because God, we always say that We were just saying today that there are so many guys that we haven't seen yet that we've drafted. And it would be nice to like be there in real time and see them, because you can watch highlights and everything, but you don't get the same feel as you do watching them live.
Right. I don't think I got the West Virginia one after all, unfortunately. So, but there is a picture out there of Wally Triplett if you look for it in that West Virginia game. He actually scored a touchdown late to put them ahead, I believe. So, I think he actually caught the touchdown pass if I remember correctly. Yeah, that was one where it was a 49-yard touchdown pass. Yep, that's what I'm thinking of. Fran Rogel also had a touchdown, 117 yards rushing and a touchdown in that game. For whatever reason, I don't know if we just give credit to West Virginia for this, but West Virginia has like all of the box score stats for that game. I was able to find like everything box score stats related for that game. Wasn't able to find that for a lot of the other games, but that game specifically was really well taken care of. So I think it's a school thing, man. I think you get someone back in the day really cared about their history and they were able to dig that stuff up. And now now that it's on the internet, it's going to be there forever. And I just feel like some schools were better than other schools at maintaining that.
No, I mean, that's why historians exist, right? And there are historians in everything, in college football and, whatever walk of life you're in. And it's important that they keep track of this stuff. And, I think today, like when we're sitting here in 80 years, then our grandkids are talking about the 2022 Penn State team. I have a feeling the information will be more readily available just with the internet and the way everything is cataloged, but you never know. I mean, we don't know what the internet's going to be like in 80 years. I mean, they might just have stuff wiped. So it's important that historians are around in college football and really everywhere. And I say that as a guy who was a history minor myself in college.
I was gonna say I didn't know for sure if you were a major or minor, but I knew you had some history in there. My dad always said, "Hey, you go on a trip, you're gonna take pictures or whatever." He said you should really write stuff down. Like you'd be surprised how many things and I did that for certain trips. And you'd go back and look at that and be like, "Wow, like I totally forgot about X, Y, and Z that didn't, I don't even remember happened if I didn't have it written down." So highly recommend people write stuff down. I probably should do a better job as it as well. Okay.
So, yeah.
We're going to get towards the Cotton Bowl now and what all that significance meant. I want to give a shout out to Wally Triplett and Denny Hogard for being, those two guys, right? Being the first two to really, I don't want to say just them alone, right? But as far as college football goes and Penn State goes, even at this time at Penn State, Black students only made up like 1%, if that, of the student body. At this point at Penn State, Black students weren't even allowed to live on campus. They were living at the Lincoln Hall off campus, which is basically just a boarding house for not just African American athletes, but students as well. And I think there's still a plaque there off of where that was. And I think it's important, Shawn, like I'm not trying to discredit Penn State. And I think it's very important how Penn State is able to, you talked briefly about 1947 Orange Bowl where they declined it and basically said if we all can't play, none of us can play. And because Miami wanted Penn State to leave their Black players at home, and they didn't go. And I think that's like Penn State being on the right side of history. However, Penn State, its university, wasn't integrated with their college dorms, as was most places, wasn't. And additionally, State College wasn't really that integrated. From what I read, barbershops, restaurants, most fraternities, all that was still very much segregated. And so I want to, as we talk about this story, give lots of credit to Penn State. And I think it changed the Cotton Bowl and eventually college football forever for the better. But I do want to at least not romanticize it to the point where it was like Penn State could do no wrong, right? Like things were still not great in the 1940s and 1947, even at Penn State. And Penn State still had a far and long road ahead to get where it needed to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it was the same at most college campuses. I mean, this was, I believe, 6 years before Brown, or 7 years before Brown v. Board of Education, which outlawed segregation, separate but equal facilities. But I mean, in reality, separate but equal existed for another 20 years because it took a long time the Supreme Court said with all deliberate pace, I believe that was it, which basically meant, nah, we're not going to really tell them when to do it, just get to it eventually. And, Penn State was like a lot of different institutions in that pre-Brown v. Board of Education, separate but equal was the law. Like, you did not have to acknowledge African Americans as equals. Well, it was separate but equal, which meant they were going to get crap facilities and they weren't going to be able to enjoy the same privileges that their white students would. So that was the way it was, and it was wrong. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, did Penn State help change college football? Yeah, like Wally Triplett, and Denny Hoggard playing in the South, in the segregated South, at the Cotton Bowl. I mean, that was huge historical significance, and we don't want to minimize Penn State, and we don't want to say that we don't want to say that they were all bad, but it's important to not whitewash what Penn State was.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, right? Like yeah, I think that was put well. So 1948 Cotton Bowl in Dallas. Dallas very much segregated at the time. Originally, Cotton Bowl said, "Hey, why don't you leave your black players at home?" Penn State was like, "Ooh, no, don't really want to do that. Sorry." At this point, pretty much all the bowl games are in the South, Sean. I mean, they're all down there. So I don't really know how Penn State was going to combat this issue if this didn't happen the way it did. But I mean, this was going to be inevitable pretty much time and time again. It happened 2 years in a row for a reason. I do want to give some credit to the SMU head coach, and I, for whatever reason, did not write his name down. Do you have his name, Sean?
I did not either, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Hold on, let me see.
Because he basically was like Matt Bell,
yeah.
He was basically like, look, we want to play Penn State at their best. And if Penn State's at their best with their two African American players, bring them on down here. And he's quoted by even saying, quote, "After all, we're supposed to live in a democracy," which I don't really know if democracy was necessarily the exact right phrasing, but his point was very clear. Like, we're supposed to all be able to represent, whether it's our country or our football team, we're supposed to be able to, do that. And from a competition perspective, we want to play the best. Penn State undefeated at the time, number 4 in the country. SMU, I think, was 3.
Yes.
They wanted to play the best. And also, I think there's, from what I could tell and what I read, SMU players didn't really care. They looked at Penn State as a football team and a football team only. I didn't know this, and I bet a lot of people didn't know this, that after the SMU game in the Cotton Bowl, Penn State and SMU, they showered, and then they actually went back to SMU's facilities and ate together after the game, which that just blew my mind, Sean. I did not know that, and it just to me proved like, hey, on the top level, it was very political, and there's a lot of drive, and that's how we'll remember things. But at the core of it, it was still football to these guys. And it was collegiate athletics at its best. And so I just thought that was a really cool part of it. Just to kind of show that, hey, SMU probably doesn't get enough credit, because SMU could have been super difficult about it. They could have said, no, we're not playing unless, you don't bring your black players. And honestly, Penn State probably would have said, okay, I guess we're not playing again. But SMU, deserves some credit there, Sean.
No, I agree. Because it could have been, like you said, they could have been way more difficult than they were. And, I mean, at the time, I mean, segregation was the law of the land, and it was probably a majority opinion. I think definitely a majority opinion, especially among white people in the South. But for their players to just say, "Look, it's football. We'll play a football game against whoever because we want to show how good we are and we want to play them at full strength." Yeah, it probably goes a long way. And also something I didn't know was Doak Walker played in this game. And if you're not familiar with Doak Walker, well, he has an award named after him. That's for the best running back in the country, and he played for SMU.
Yeah, and not only did he play, but he played extremely well. I mean, he was.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't for Doak Walker, which obviously, but if you take away your best player, they're not as good. But without them, I mean, he scored both of their touchdowns. He threw one and he ran one, and he almost returned a kickoff right before the end of the half, but Wally Triplett actually tackled him before he could score a touchdown and it ended the half. So just, I mean, and which is funny is because Doak Walker and Wally Triplett ended up playing together in the NFL. So two guys on either side of history in the Cotton Bowl end up playing together in the NFL and eventually become pretty good friends. So just a lot of kind of coincidences, Shawn. Another coincidence that I want to bring up with, I don't know if you were aware of this, not. I know I wasn't until I read about it. Some Penn State players, I think, were upset at the time because they got to go to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl. They weren't allowed to stay in any hotels because they had two African Americans with them, so they stayed on a naval base. Naval bases weren't like what they were now ever since, I don't even know if 9/11 was really the cause of it, but they weren't like they were now. They weren't as secure. From what I heard, Penn State players were sneaking out of the base and they were going to Dallas and they were going to clubs and all this stuff. And Shawn, I don't know if you can see the picture or not, but do you know what club that is?
Well, it says Girls Carousel Burlesque. So I could only imagine the kind of hanky-panky activity going on in there.
Yeah, so this was the Carousel Club. And although they were segregated, the owner said, according, I believe, to Wally Triplett, said, "We never had N-words in here, but we'd love..." Oh, man. Can't read my own writing. Yeah. "We have never had N-words in here, but we'd love to have you now." Do you know who said that?
Who?
Who owned the Carousel Club?
Dallas. Was it? This is gonna sound a little off. Was it Jack Ruby?
It was Jack Ruby.
How about that?
That was pretty good, Shawn.
I am a history guy, and I was thinking Dallas Strip Club, and I was like, Jack Ruby.
Yeah. And obviously, for those that don't know, Jack Ruby, what did he do, Shawn?
So Jack Ruby, the day after Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy, he killed Lee Harvey Oswald, and he's a shady figure, and there are those who think he may have been in on the Kennedy assassination as well. But I don't know.
So here, did anyone else expect us? And when I started this podcast today, talking about the 1947 Penn State football team, that we would get to the JFK assassination?
I mean, it is Dallas, and let's see, it was 16 years later. So, I mean, maybe, yeah, I could kind of see it. I did not know that the football players were partying in Jack Ruby's strip club, though. I did not know that.
Yep. Yeah, so I thought that was, I was baffled when I saw that one. 9 months after Jackie Robinson, I wanted to mention that. And then here's kind of the thing. So just to maybe give credit a little bit more to Penn State, just to give you an idea, Texas wouldn't allow black players on their team until 1969. Wow. So you're talking 20 more years from when this happened before they allowed African American players on their program. So from all intents and purposes, Penn State very much ahead of, Texas, which I don't know if that's saying that much, but I mean, that's a big time program to be I mean, you're talking almost 1970, Shawn.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Excuse me. Well, of course, Steve Suey, offensive lineman for Penn State. That's the We Are Penn State kind of came from when they were down there in Dallas. He said no meetings need to happen. Look, like we're playing with our two black players, and that was kind of the end of it. So that's kind of the beginning of the We Are Penn State. And then as we could do a whole nother conversation on the origin of the We Are Penn State. Maybe it's that one single cheerleader dude who was in that Washington State Penn State game by himself, because that guy deserves credit for something. I wanted to show this.
I wonder if he was in Dallas too.
I don't know.
Is he at the Carousel Club?
I don't know, but he definitely deserved a ticket for what he was doing out there, bringing the juice in Hershey Park in 1947. I do not have credit for whose picture this is, and I'm sorry if whatever. You just have to get over it. But I feel like at certain point, educational purposes, like this isn't anyone's credit, but I don't know how that exactly works. But if you're on podcast right now, I have a ticket stub. And I don't even know if it's accurate, to be honest with you, but it looks pretty cool. Was that
$4.40 to get in?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. I love how they include the federal tax on it. $4.40 to sit in the 49th row, 16th section, 34th seat for the Cotton Bowl on January 1st, 1948. So.
Is that the same Cotton Bowl as today? Like, I know they play at Jerry World now, but is that the same like Cotton Bowl that Oklahoma, Texas playing?
I think
Probably
so.
Is, right? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah,
Someone's gonna. I don't have the origin of the Cotton Bowl in front of me. I just like they don't do ticket stubs. Well, obviously they don't do ticket stubs like that at all. But didn't even like if they would have kept doing ticket stubs with stuff like that, I feel like people would have been more reluctant to let go of it, right? Like, I mean, the art on that, like that is something that I would want to keep, right?
Yep.
And I don't know, if Penn State did something like that for every home game, I think people would really, and they still charge $10 if you wanted a true copy. I bet a lot of people would still want those.
I mean, I think some people still want them, but they're just such boring tickets. I mean, they've all been pretty simple looking my whole life, and that is a bowl game, so maybe they do them up a little bit. Like the Rose Bowl tickets, correct me if I'm wrong, they look pretty cool still.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they do. So, but yeah, that's. And by the way, for inflation, $4.40 in 1948 would be $54 today. So it's about $54.62. So it's about $55 to get into the game.
So a respectable number.
Yeah, not bad.
I'm just curious too, like how many people were able to travel from Pennsylvania. I don't know. And something
many.
We didn't talk about it very much, and by the way, I just looked up the history and I don't see anything saying it's different. So I think it is the same. The Cotton Bowl on its own could be a whole podcast. I mean, you got the Ice Bowl, you got the chicken soup game, you got Flutie, you got the game played 6 weeks after JFK's assassination. I mean, there's a lot of history in the Cotton Bowl.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, I don't think we mentioned it, or I think we mentioned it on last episode, but I don't think we spoke about it today. And that is that you had guys that were serving in World War II come back. So this was, I don't know if it was Lou Prado. Somebody equated it to BYU's football teams that were coming back from mission trips. So like you had some 25 and 24-year-olds when you typically, had 19, 20-year-olds. So I thought that was pretty funny way to put it. But so you had a very mixture of guys between old 20, 25-year-olds that, I don't know necessarily what kind of combat they saw, but were in World War II. And then also guys that were still, or, you could qualify maybe as kids still, 18, 19-year-olds. So wide range of characters on this 1947 team as well.
Yeah, and really, I think the only sort of equivalent to it would be COVID, and that's that they had another year for COVID, but these guys were gone for 3, 4 years in a war zone, and some of these guys that played before World War II started or during World War II and had to go over, some of them didn't come back. So it was, I mean, that probably really hit home, like, and just is devastating that there were guys that might have played in, the early 40s, might have played with a guy like Wally Triplett, and or I don't know how old Wally was, but like might have played with some of these guys that were 25, 26, like their teammates in their freshman year of college. They didn't come back. So it was a tough time for the world. Those
Yeah, I got some extra information on you, logistics for the Cotton Bowl. Sold out quickly, 43,000 seats because of Penn State and obviously the stuff surrounding the game and Doak Walker. I think we're underestimating how important Doak Walker was during that time. SMU, if you don't know the history of SMU, like SMU is not what SMU was back then. SMU was a big deal back then. If you're thinking SMU group of five team, like no, 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 you need to go like private schools in general were big deals, but SMU, Dallas area, I think Doak Walker was originally from Dallas too. I mean, so for him to be playing basically in his home, not just state, but in his home city, I mean, this was a big time deal. And the next year, the Cotton Bowl actually expanded to 60,000, which in the 1940s, to have a 60,000 capacity stadium is pretty incredible. So, yeah, I wanted that. They said that Penn State traveled by train to Texas before Christmas. And they were down there for a solid 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And PennLive says here, quote, that the older war vets quickly tired of the accommodations and were tired of the barracks living and wanted to party. So there you have it.
can't blame them.
Yeah, there's a PennLive article about this stuff. It comes up pretty quickly on a Google search. There's another good picture of Jack Ruby in there too. But I recommend you check that out. Any other things that you want to? Oh, I was gonna say, Triplett scored to tie the game in the Cotton Bowl, and Denny Hogard was actually had a chance to potentially win it. Tip pass, wasn't able to haul it in to maybe even win the game. So both were pretty instrumental in the Cotton Bowl itself. Hogard was originally from Philly. Dad was a minister. Dad got into politics as well. I believe Hogard was the first to integrate a Penn State fraternity as well. So just so much. Every time you pick up history from this era, it seems like there's just something else you forget to mention. So just a really cool story, Shawn. I'm really glad that we were able to flesh this out because, I mean, I learned a lot in the last 2 weeks that I was not aware of when it came to this season.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's the first great Penn State team, and to have not just have the team's historic significance to the school, but its significance to college football and integration and sports. Like one thing you hear a lot is, oh, sports, there's too much politics in sports today. There's always been politics in sports. You don't think this was politics in sports? You don't think that there were people back then that were very offended that Penn State wouldn't go down to Miami because they had two black players? You don't think that made people angry? Of course it did. You don't think there were people saying, oh, they should have just got over it and just went? Of course there were. I mean, it baffles me when I hear people say things like that. And you just look at all of these different examples of sports being quote unquote political. Like, yeah, sports are just a I think that's the right word, microcosm of society. Like, it's just part of society. And what goes on in sport, what goes on in the world, goes on in sports. And sports need to be integrated too. And Penn State was a big part of integrating college athletics. So I'm happy we did this subject. I'm happy that Cory was the one that was, he said it to me a few weeks ago. He's like, we have to talk about the 1947 season. And I was like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I'm happy we did it.
Yeah, this last picture comes from Joe Hermit, PennLive. Again, thank you to Joe. He gave me verbal or actually text that said, hey, yeah, we can use it. With James Franklin and Wally Triplett, the late Wally Triplett, I should say. I think that's just a powerful image. I don't think this picture really gets enough credit. I think there's maybe other ones of Wally Triplett towards, the end, but this one, to me, what Wally Triplett did, and then now what James Franklin, I think it shows A, progress has been made, but then B, that there's still yet progress to come. And as we kind of wrap up Black History Month, I think this was kind of the perfect way to talk about it, and relate it to Penn State football, especially the quote unquote off season. But Shawn, I agree, man. I mean, it really, sports is just a thermometer for what society is. And if you think sports are political now, I mean, sports really aren't even close to as political as they were in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, you guys get mad about the college football rankings being political. You guys would lose your minds if you saw how people were ranked and how players were chosen for certain awards back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Hell, even, of course, I guess even into the 90s. So you just go. It's important to go back in time, I think, sometimes, because I think it puts everything into perspective. Yes, things still suck when it comes to race. Yes, things still suck when it comes to how we figure out who the national champion is. But in hindsight, things are getting better, and I think it's good to put it all into perspective.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like you said, we've come so far, and we still have some ways to go. And I mean, I don't think like Wally Triplett, like having to stay on a different at not even being able to live on campus. I mean, he probably couldn't even imagine a black man being the head coach at Penn State. And James Franklin is, and one of James Franklin's goals, he has said this before, is to be the first African American head coach to win a national championship. And I think that would be a very significant accomplishment. It really, it would be an honor if Penn State was able to have the first African American coach to win a national championship. So we have some ways to go. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that there aren't enough black head coaches in college football. There aren't enough black head coaches in the NFL. And we still have a ways to go. And I think there are different ways you could go about doing that we're not going to get into now. But in general, it's something that needs to change. And but that's a whole lot better than what they had to deal with back in the days of Wally Triplett.
Right. The irony of if that game just happened to be the Cotton Bowl that year, which I know now they're going to other places that aren't even bowls for the national championship, but the irony of if it was Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, or even Penn State in the Cotton Bowl for a playoff game, I mean, that would be pretty crazy too. So, moving on. Hope you guys enjoy that. Let us know if you liked it or not. We plan to do some more of those deep dives here in the off season. But anyway, it takes a little bit more time to do the research, so that's kind of the way it is. Okay, fan questions time. We have one fan question. We have two bold predictions, and I have a question for you, Shawn. I think I'm going to make you pause on if you have a question for me. I'll just make you save it. Unless it's has to be time oriented. Otherwise, let's save it just because.
Yep.
We've been chugging along here for a little bit already. And I don't want to have to rush through the wide receiver draft that I think is going to be chaotic. Fan question time. Again, you can drop us questions at Hardcore PSUFB. We ask for questions every single week. You can message us on Facebook or Instagram as well if you want to drop them that way. This question comes from the casual Philly fan, who I'm guessing is probably not having a fantastic week. But nonetheless, he says, or she says, because I do not know, if one wide receiver breaks out, do you think Penn State will have the best offense in the Big Ten? So assuming a Dante Cephas or a Malik McLean, or I'm assuming he's going to say Keandre Lambert-Smith hasn't broken out, or a Trey Wallace, with the potential at quarterback and with the weapons at wide receiver, Shawn, and the start on that tight end, with what we think is going to be a pretty good offensive line. And may I add, potentially a step back for the Ohio State offense, although the Michigan offense really isn't taking that much of a step back. Maybe their offensive line will take a small step back, but they got their quarterback back. They got their 2 running backs back. They got I don't know if they lost Ronnie Bell, but they still got weapons at wide receiver.
I think they did, yeah.
But will Penn State then have the best offense in the Big Ten? Because really, that's all you're competing with.
I'm gonna go with no, only because there's still some unknowns there. I still don't know how good Drew Aller's gonna be, and I know there are a lot of people who are convinced that Drew Aller is the second coming of Christ, and I'm just not there yet. And it's no disrespect to him. I think from everything I've seen, he's a great prospect, but I got to see it. I am somebody who wants to see. I'm somebody who wants to see things before I proclaim somebody as the next big thing. And the good news is, I was just talking about this with my dad 2 nights ago. We're gonna know pretty early. We're gonna know by the end of September, I think, what Drew Aller is, and I'm happy about that. I'd rather know early. And yeah, I can't say though with a great deal of confidence that we're going to be the best team in the Big Ten if we have a true number 1 receiver, just because I have to see what Drew Aller does as QB1.
I'm going to agree with you. I got to see what Drew Aller is going to be. And even then, I'm not going to put a Ryan Day offense ahead until I see it. So, no. And honestly, the Michigan offense is still probably going to be able to run the rock exceptionally well. So, I'm going to say no. They need a little bit more than that. I mean, they didn't really have that number 1 wide receiver. I still don't necessarily think you have to have a number 1 wide receiver. But yeah, I'm going to say you need a little bit more than that. I honestly don't think you need to have the best offense in the Big Ten to win the Big Ten. I think if you have a consistent offense, I mean, look at the Ohio State game. If they just don't turn the ball over, they win the game. And they turn the ball over. So, I mean, you could argue you don't have to have the best offense. You just have to have a pretty good offense and a good defense. And
I agree with that, yeah.
You know, the Michigan game, I still think you have to score points early. We've talked about that before as far as beating Michigan. You got to score early, make them play out of their comfort zone. Otherwise, it's going to be a weird game, and you're probably not going to like it. But thank you for the question, casual Philly fan. We have 2 very, very long-time listeners with the next 2 questions. This first one, or bold predictions, I'm sorry. This first one's from Dorito Bandit. And he says, bold prediction, Abdul Carter leads the Big Ten in sacks and tackles for loss. Hopefully that pops up for you guys in a second. Shawn, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's rare for a 4-3 linebacker to lead the Big Ten in sacks. Could it happen? Yeah. Because we all know how Manny Diaz likes to use his linebackers. There's a lot of blitzing in his defense. I just don't know if I could say that he's going to lead the Big Ten in sacks. And also, you have to consider Chop Robinson's there, and Denai Dennis Sutton's there, and Adise Isaac is there. So, and heck, even Hakeem Beamon in the middle. So there's going to be a lot of sacks to go around, and I just don't know if he's going to be able to lead the conference necessarily. I don't think he's going to have the opportunity maybe to lead the conference in sacks just because there's so many guys who who do a very good job getting after the quarterback on the defense.
Yeah, so just to give everyone an idea, last year in the Big Ten, the leader with sacks had 11, and Abdul Carter was fourth with 6.5. Does that make you feel any?
He had more than I thought he had, to be honest with you.
Does that
I'm
change
still
you
gonna
at
say
all?
I'm still gonna say what I said. I'm still gonna stick by what I said. I think DDS is gonna have. I think he's gonna really step up this year too.
Chop Robinson had 5.5. But here's my thing. Why I'm gonna say no is because Manny Diaz defensive backs are picking up sacks. I mean, what? Johnny Dixon, I think, had 3. I think Jair Brown had 4.5. I mean, those are sacks that are being taken away from a linebacker or a defensive end. So to me, and I think Daquan Hardy had 1. And I think Kalen King had 1. So those are just a couple corners that I'm pretty sure had sack, and I think maybe one of the other safeties had a sack too. So there's a lot of sacks by guys that were not linebackers or defensive linemen. So I'm gonna say, ooh, a little tough there for me to go on to that. And also, I don't know what I mean. Well, the Rutgers and the Indianas of the world can really stockpile your TFLs. We saw them have a stupid amount, like 16 in both of those games. So I don't want to say TFLs aren't common with this defense. Well, I mean, the thing is with this defense is like they either get the TFL or they give up a big gain. So I'm guessing you could end up with a guy who gets a lot of TFLs and a lot of sacks, but their defense isn't necessarily amazing. So I guess I'm going to say it's possible, but I'm going to say that's a pretty high on the boldness scale if we're going to go with what Josh Pate Late Kick Live does. That would probably be up there at like. If you just told me sacks or just TFLs, I think I'd maybe put it like a 7. But both of them, probably put it like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, that's true too. That because then you have to add in TFLs too, and man, oh man, then you're talking about a Heisman candidate then.
Yeah, let me see if I could just randomly pull this up for you, just to give you an idea. TFL leader was 15.5 TFLs. Abdul Carter had 10.5. So I mean, he's in the ballpark, right? I mean, just a couple more plays versus you're muted.
TFLs would be more likely than sacks, I think.
What if Penn State's playing? What if teams are playing from behind more though?
Yeah.
Which I don't really know, like how many teams really played from in front besides Michigan. But even just that Michigan game, like let's say that's just a more evenly played game. Maybe Abdul Carter gets 1 more sack there instead of no sacks.
Out of the game earlier though, because I think there's going to be a lot of teams we just run through this year. I hope.
They did a good job of really rotating guys to begin with. But yeah, I see what you're saying. And again, it's not like he's sharing. It's not like he's going to be just the dude. I mean, you got Curtis Jacobs back too. So I think we're kind of forgetting about him a little bit as well. This next one's from Einstein von Braun, a.k.a. Mr. And he says, bold prediction, Drew Aller will struggle at some point the first half of the season, and he will be called a bust by some in the fan base, and that he should be benched for Pabula when all he needs is time, experience, and patience. He also went on to say, and then those same fans will still blame Sean Clifford, which I just love that. Also, Christoph said that Michigan is returning like 84% of their offensive production. So just keep that in mind with that first question by a casual Philly fan. Sean,
yeah,
the struggle at the first half of the season. So if we're going to take that literally, I guess that struggle is probably going to happen at the Illinois game. If we had to find a game.
Probably. I mean, I don't think West Virginia's defense is much to write home about. Am I correct in that?
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah. And then Iowa's the next week. Yeah. I could definitely see that happening. Let's say Drew Aller. Let's say we beat West Virginia, but Drew Aller looks unimpressive. Maybe he throws 2 interceptions. Guarantee after the second interception, you go on the message boards. You go on the message boards. If you guys are on message boards out there, you're going to see people calling for Pagula, because that's what we have today. Because people are putzes and they don't have patience, and it's a microwave society, and that's the way it goes. They don't they just don't get the way things work. So yeah, there's going to be some people. Do I think it's going to be a majority of the fan base? No, I don't. But there's going to be people out there because, and they're in every crowd you go in there's somebody calling for the backup quarterback. So yeah, I think that this is almost certainly going to happen, because Drew Aller's probably going to have a game in September where he's not sharp. And that happens because he's a first-year starter and he's got to learn. And I have faith that the team's going to be good enough to make up for it, especially in September. But yeah, there are going to be people that start doubting Aller, and I think it's kind of asinine. Now, are we going to let him off the hook here on the pod? No. No, we're gonna call a spade, just like we called a spade about Sean Clifford. But we're not gonna get all irrational and start calling for the backup quarterback because Drew Aller turned the ball over a couple times in a game. So that's what we're gonna be doing. But everybody else, I don't know.
They're gonna be doing either. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. I agree with what you said. Just gonna move on with life. My question for you, Shawn. 24/7 Sports came out with their, let me make sure I get this right, with their, I don't even know how they came out with this already, projected win totals for 2023. Michigan was at 11, Ohio State was at 11, Penn State was at 9.5, Wisconsin's at 8, Iowa's at 8, and so forth. Northwestern's at 3.5, by the way. Penn State at 9.5. You take an over-under on that, Shawn? That's my question, and why?
Over. Because I just think we're straight up better than 10 of the teams on our schedule. At least on paper we are. I mean, we'll see how the season plays out, but looking at the schedule right now, I just think we're a flat-out better team than 10 of the teams on our schedule.
Are you surprised that number's at 9.5? I mean, if that number...
A little bit.
Who knows what Vegas does? If Vegas comes out and says 9.5 over under for Penn State, I mean, I'm probably actually putting some serious money on that.
I kind of thought we'd be at 10. I didn't think we'd be up to 10.5. I think 10.5 might be a little high for Vegas, because that would assume that, the Ohio State or Michigan game is going to be 50-50. And I wouldn't expect that, but I kind of thought it would be at 10 wins.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, it's hard for Vegas, right? If you're trying to go one way or not, I think 9.5 is low, but I agree 10.5 is like to make people bet on an 11-win season. I think you're not going to get as much action.
Yep.
But 10, I mean, 10 seems like a safe number at this point. So I don't know. I was just curious what your thoughts were. I thought it was very, very early, given that Penn State didn't land Chop Robinson until the spring, and there's going to be a lot of other movements. I mean, Georgia just lost Todd Monken a couple days ago. Actually, I think before this was even released. So I think that number is kind of crazy to throw out right now, but what do I know? Anyway, thank you for the fan questions again. Not so much lately. I know you guys maybe aren't listening every episode or are behind on them. I don't really know, but hey, keep dropping us fan questions. We really appreciate it. You will get them answered on the show. Thank you, everybody. Okie dokie. Shawn, do you want to... Well, we haven't confirmed since originally set up, but do you want to go ahead and tell everyone who we're going to have on the show next week?
Yeah, do you want me to make the announcement?
I think it's a fair thing to drop, and I don't think we drop it on social media, and so maybe we get 100% confirmation because when we set it up, it's been a week now, so maybe I should double check tomorrow. But I'm feeling pretty good. That's not a big deal. But oh yeah, you can just include it after you say it. But I think it's a good Easter egg for people that have listened 2 hours in.
Yeah. So last week, Corey and I, we were texting. I was on my lunch, and I was like, you know who would probably come on here? And we said Jay Paterno. So we had some contact with Jay behind the scenes, and he's helped find some rosters for us for the simulations. And so we had some contact with Jay. And then Corey said, yeah, let me try to get in contact with them. And he got his email, and we have Jay on next week at 8. Well, whenever, I don't think we ironed out the exact time, but it'll be on the pod. It'll be live. So yeah, we're very excited to have the former quarterback coach at Penn State, former passing game coordinator at Penn State, and yes, Joe Paterno's son, Jay Paterno, on next week.
Yeah, we'll break that officially once we get just to double confirm. But we're going to be talking to him. I want to talk to him about quarterback development. I think that's, we're not going to necessarily dig on him necessarily, but I think this is a pretty big, it's a very good comparison for what Penn State is about to see in Drew Aller. And so I think it's very relevant to the conversation. I want to talk to him. Board of Trustees re-election stuff is going on right now. I think there actually might have been a meeting or something tonight. They also have a huge vote coming up for an expansion on some Haluba Hall stuff, some practice field stuff, some additional money being spent there, a couple more $1 million there. I want to say it was 7 or 4 million. I don't know, somewhere around there. So they got to vote on that. But I want to get his, because I believe, Shawn, and maybe you don't know this or maybe you do know this, I believe he voted against a previous expansion at
Lash, right?
at Lash, yes.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask him kind of like about that and what kind of the thoughts are and how does Penn State, do both, if you will. And then also I want to throw up there, which I think will be really fun. I want to throw up some old game footage of plays that, memorable plays, and kind of just get the vibe of what it was like on the sideline, what the thought process was, and kind of the moments leading up and the moments after the play. So I think that would be pretty fun to show them on film and kind of what the thought process was.
Yeah. And, I want to ask him about Joe and, yes, some stuff that, the scandal that ultimately led in Joe getting fired at Penn State, and just the way that the media reported it and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, I'm also curious about we're going to be asking him, of course, about Michael Robinson and Darryl Clark, but also what happened in the Morelli years and what happened with the Rob Bolden years. So it's going to be at least I think, and I think Corey agrees, it's going to be a pretty wide-ranging interview. So I'm very excited about it because Jay's an interesting figure at Penn State. I mean, the whole Paterno family is, and I'm excited to be talking to him, and I'm very grateful that he gave us the opportunity.
Yeah, and I can just let everyone know it's probably going to be at the beginning of the show. We start at 8 now, which is better than 9, but not everybody in the world stays up until crazy late hours like Sean Kane does. So anyway, that's the breaking news there. Hopefully, if you have been listening on a podcast this long or still on YouTube, you got to see something pretty cool. So really, really excited for that. So okay, Shawn, drum roll. It is time to draft.
I'm ready.
Let me get that screen out of the way. Is your camera going to go off on us today?
It may. And if it does, I'm going to switch to my laptop the camera. So you won't be able to see my pretty face in HD.
I know no one said anything about the last one about you disappearing, but I was surprised by that.
Yeah, it's just because the Skype uses up a lot of the battery, and I only have so many slots.
I gotta get you. I got one of these things that gives me more USB slots is what you need.
Yeah, because I only have 2 of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of
Yeah,
them's for my bike and the other one's for my camera.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I'll send you one. I got like this little box thing here that lets me go from 1 to an additional 4. And that's on if it's for the Mac too. So
Yeah, that'd be cool. Thanks.
because I got mic, I got camera, I don't know what else I got going on. I got just stuff running everywhere in here. We're moving, I don't know if I've told everyone else in the world that yet, but we're eventually moving here in a couple months, and it's like just trying to figure out how to move all of our stuff and obviously all that. So that will be fun. But anyway, okay. I guess let me do the little coin toss thing. Did you choose first or did I choose first last time?
I chose first.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with heads. Here we go. And it's heads.
All right. You have the floor, Mr. Musto.
I always try to show you, but it doesn't. Oh, wait. If I keep it close to my head. Nope. Still can't see it. Oh, there you go. I don't know if you can tell, but that is a head on there.
Yep, I see it. Looks like
Anyway.
a woman's head. Yep.
Yeah. So Penn State wide receivers draft. I have the first pick. I'm on the clock. And with my first pick, I'm going to take Bobby Ingram. 1991 to 1995. 167 catches, 3,000 total yards, 31 touchdowns. CFB Hall of Famer, 3-time All-American. Was a part of one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in Penn State history. I don't really know how much else there needs to be said there. I mean, he was, I think, in my opinion, surefire 1 or 2. I don't know. 1, I think that roughly, maybe someone could have him at 3, but I think he's up there.
Yeah, I mean, I have Bobby Ingram 1 too. Just so accomplished. He's 3-time All-American. I mean, how many 3-time All-Americans has Penn State had? I mean, it's a very short list. Blitnikoff winner. I think it has to be Bobby Ingram, number 1, and he would have been my pick as well.
His talent, I mean, just like he was before us as far as like really, and so like his film, it's just like imagine what he could do in like a true modern day offense. Would have been really excited to see, like in a Mike Yursich scheme. He's one guy I wish you could plug out of an old era and put into a newer era.
Yeah, me too. And I think the only guy that we saw that was in style that was like him was Jahan Dotson. And to me, he's the only one that you could really use as a comp. Just because of how smooth he ran his routes, his speed, his hands. I mean, he just had it all. He was a perfect receiver. He really was. So, with my first pick, this was another tough one. I mean, the top 3 or 4 are really hard. But to me, I'm going to go with Allen Robinson. He was the 2-time Richter Howard Receiver of the Year, 2-time All Big Ten, and was a fantastic player for Penn State. He really helped Penn State. Really helped Christian Hackenberg his freshman year. He helped make Matt McGloin improve as a passer, and just again, eye test. He was a physically dominating guy. Like small corners just had no chance against him, and he would just go up and moss people. He had great speed. He had good speed, maybe not great speed. He had good speed. I always thought he had good football speed. I remember he slipped a little bit in the draft, and I remember thinking, man, people are just zeroing in on his 40, but if you watch him, he's fast enough. He's gonna be fine. And he had a fantastic pro career. He's a little older now, doesn't get as good as separation. But he's the best Penn State receiver I've ever seen there. So I got Allen Robinson number 2 on my list, and number 1 on my team.
We always do that, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, just for disclosure, I had Allen Robinson too as well. So I could see why other people might not have him, but I think for people in our age group, I think it's a pretty easy pick. The catch in the Michigan game, honestly, what I will forever remember, it was a blowout against Ohio State, but that touchdown he had against Ohio State where he like reversed the field like 17 times, like that play to me, I'll always remember.
Oh, I know.
And so,
so fun to watch.
So yeah, I totally get it. Just I think so underrated after the catch early in his career too, and what he was able to do. One of those guys that doesn't look like he's running fast, but is running fast too because of his length. But
remember that Syracuse game too, in the first game of the year. He was kind of quiet the first half, and then the second half they just couldn't cover him, and he really single-handedly won us the game. So just an unbelievable talent.
I'm gonna be curious where you had this person. I think we're on the same page so far. I know we are on the same page so far, but we were talking before the show. We thought maybe this is 3 to 6. I think it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of kind of guys that could fit in there depending where you're coming from. But I'm gonna go with my second pick and 3rd overall with OJ McDuffie, who played in 89, 91, 92, 125 catches, 1,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, 1,500 returning yards. Only real knock on him is touchdowns, but Shawn, as you know, he was also a Dolphin great, which I'm sure I'm thinking that's why you were probably going to pick him with your next pick, was probably the tiebreaker maybe for you. He won the MVP award in the 92 Fiesta Bowl, and I believe he is 3rd in all-purpose yards in a single season behind just Saquon Barkley and Larry Johnson. So the dude just racked up yards. Kind of played during a weird time at Penn State where it was like after the last national championship, but it was right before the 94 season. And a lot of people always wonder, like, if McDuffie was there the same time Ingram was there, I mean, holy crap. I mean, they might have scored even more points somehow. But he was just a solid all around Swiss Army knife, if you will, if you can give him that title for a guy in the early 90s. And I'm guessing Shawn just had to lose the camera?
Yeah, I'm still here though.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. OJ McDuffie. I mean, fun fact about him that Big Shawn told me. So Joe was never big into postseason and to individual awards. The only guy he ever pushed for the Heisman was OJ McDuffie. So that just tells you what Joe thought of him. And I mean, he was an unbelievable player. And then like you said, great Miami Dolphin. He was with Marino when Marino was older. And Marino was also still some prime Marino, but was a great talent in the NFL, and Dolphins great. So I had McDuffie 5th. So I did
interesting.
Yes, I had him 5th.
Do you have a younger guy ahead of him?
I have 2 younger guys ahead of him.
Interesting.
Yep. So, but like you said, it's very close up here, up where we're at. And this was a hard one for me. And with my second pick, I'm going to go with the greatest thing from Nazareth since Jesus, Jahan Dotson.
Wow. Wow.
Indeed. So Jahan Dotson, first team All Big Ten in 2021, third team All Big Ten in 2020. Had a, really came onto the scene in 2020 in the COVID year. Was very, very good throughout the whole season. I remember the first 5 games of the year were 0-5. I just kept saying, the only guy who does anything every week is Dotson. And he was really carrying that team through those first 5 games. And he, let me see here. Yeah, he had 884 yards in 2020, and remember there were only 9 games that year, and 1,182 yards in 2021. So he finished with 25 total touchdowns in his career, averaged 15.1 yards a catch. Just smooth route runner. I mean, I don't think there was a receiver I've ever seen at Penn State that just made everything look so easy. He just made it look effortless, and he would make hard things look just super simple. And the catch that really sticks out to me was against Auburn last year, where Chris Fowler actually just if you listen to the broadcast, he assumes that it was going to get overthrown, and Jahan just jumps up out of nowhere and pulls down the catch. And I think at that point, I was like, wow, this guy's going to be a first-round pick. Like, he is different. And, he ended up being a first-round pick. He was the number 16 overall pick in the draft. That might be the highest a Penn State receiver's ever been taken in a draft. So that just shows you what the NFL thought of him. I feel for Jahan, too, that he wasn't on this 2022 team. Because him and Brisker especially, they deserve better than what they got when they were in school. So I'm gonna go with Jahan Dotson with my second pick.
It's funny because you set me up perfectly. And I think Jahan Dotson is a good pick from just a straight up athletic perspective, right? Like it's hard to really say there's that many more just athletically gifted guys than Jahan Dotson. So I get that perspective. But you just asked the question, has a Penn State wide receiver ever been drafted that high? Well, this guy was taken number 4 overall.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And will be my third pick.
Yep.
And I think I'm getting fantastic value here in the 3rd round in Kenny Jackson.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
I'm just writing this down so I can make sure I get it on paper before you try to steal them from me. 1980 to 1983. Got to start it off by saying, he's a national champion winner. I think that's very important to us. I know it's on the quarterback position, but I think it's still an important part of it. He had 2 touchdowns in the 81 game against Pitt when they beat number 1 Pitt. He was the first ever Penn State All-American at the wide receiver position. And then I think this quote just gives you the best thing. This is from Joe Paterno, quote, "The most dangerous wide receiver we've ever had." And I think that just sums it up pretty easily there. Some really solid speed with Mr. Kenny Jackson. So only 100 catches, just barely over 2,000 yards, but 25 touchdowns. 25 touchdowns in the early 80s, I think, is very impressive in my opinion. So feeling pretty good about getting Kenny Jackson with my 3rd pick. Went to the Eagles, by the way. If you're like number 4 overall to who, it was to the Eagles.
No, I like that pick. I think Kenny Jackson, as time goes on, I mean, I think he's, not forgotten about, but I mean, maybe because there have been, a bunch of great receivers just in the last 15 years at Penn State. And 1982 is a long time ago. I I mean, that's 41 years ago already. Like, I think a lot of, our older fans kind of think of 1982 as like 15 years ago, but it's not. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened in that time. And it's good that, we're not losing Kenny Jackson to history. So for my next pick, I'm gonna go.
We're big on history here. If you couldn't tell.
It's a history heavy episode today. So for my next pick, I'm gonna go with another guy that we both saw, and that's Chris Godwin. And Chris Godwin, which I didn't realize till I was doing the research into him, he had more yards in 2015 than 2016. And 2015 is where he started getting used to running the bubble screens that he would later run with Tom Brady, because that was all we ran in the John Donovan offense. And then I was like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense, because that's all we ran in 2015. So Godwin, Mike and I, our friend Mike, would often have a debate. Like he would have Godwin way higher than us on this list. He kind of thought that he might have been better than Allen Robinson. I disagree. But I mean, you can't like not look at the value of Chris Godwin. He had 11 touchdowns in 2016. He was part of one of the most highly prolific offenses ever at Penn State. He was the number one receiver there. He had 982 yards in 2016. And on a really bad offense, he had 1,100 yards receiving. So, I mean, you have to give him a ton of credit. He was third team All Big Ten in 2016. I'm kind of surprised he was that low. I kind of thought he should have been a little higher. But he might have been. But there were a lot of really good. He had a really good receiving core, and there's a guy named Saquon Barkley that got a lot of attention on that offense. So I'm gonna go with Chris Godwin. And I wish he. And I mean, look at how good he is in the NFL. He has a chance to be the best pro Penn State receiver ever. And that's a pretty cool thing. And that's my pick. What do you got, Corey?
Interesting. I mean, I love Chris Godwin. I really do. Actually, fun fact, one of my really good buddies from college went to the same high school as Chris Godwin and was there like the same time that Chris Godwin was at high school. And like one day he wasn't a football fan at all. And one day he said to me, "Hey, is Chris Godwin good at Penn State? He went to the same high school as me, and they were always talking about him." And this was like pretty much after like he exploded in 2015. So like, yeah, everyone knew who he was. And I was like, yeah, where have you been, dude? So that was always funny to me. I like the pick, and I like the Jahan Dotson pick. I just think we're looking at this a little smidgenly differently. It's hard for me to compare the 90s and even, I guess, Kenny Jackson, the 80s guys to like the more recent crowd because of volume and athletically too, right? Like, I don't know if I'm taking my 3 versus your 3 from just a straight up athletic perspective, right? Like it's hard to argue the 3 guys that you have so far, but I also still want to see some of the overall value that they brought to the team. And it's hard to really define that with the wide receivers sometimes. I will say my next pick, I feel really good about. I'm really happy to get him with my 4th pick, and that's Deion Butler. 2005 to 2008. We just talked a lot about in the impactful recruits. We talked about Justin King. We talked about Derek Williams. Well, there was another guy name that we might mention in this episode, and then there was also Deion Butler. And Deion Butler was originally a walk-on to play defensive back, and he ends up being the best wide receiver any year that he started. I mean, from a statistical perspective, you can argue maybe overall talent, but from a statistical perspective, no one was better than him. Until Deshaun Hamilton came by, he was statistically one of the best at Penn State. Deion Butler was a stud. I mean, he just prolific. 179 catches, 22 touchdowns, and he had 216 yards against Northwestern, which I think might still be the record. I know Godwin had like 180 something against somebody, but I don't know if anyone's eclipsed 200. Um, but I mean, he's just of that group, right? Of someone I'm not going to mention because he might get drafted, and I guess Derek Williams. I guess I know we talked about him last episode, but he still hasn't been drafted yet either. Um, I think he was the best out of those guys when he was able to play and when he's able to
Me too.
contribute. So that 2005, 2008, I think we had three different quarterbacks, and yet they still averaged 31.5 points per game back then, which is a pretty good number. And a lot of that has to be attributed to Deion Butler. It's kind of funny. None of those guys really did anything great in the NFL, which just kind of surprises me. But Deion Butler, I think, went to the Seahawks for a little bit, maybe went to the 49ers as well for a little bit. But um, he was one of the guys that I fell in love with. I mean, I fell in love with that whole wide receiver room in general, but for different reasons. Like Derek Williams, the explosive guy. I'm just gonna say Jordan Norwood, reliable hands, and then Deion Butler, kind of just your cornerstone, if you will. Catch the deep ball, catch the one-handed grab, catch it underneath. Just kind of did it all. So very, very happy that I was able to snag Deion Butler.
Yeah, and like you said, Deion Butler's journey at Penn State was different. Jordan Norwood was Brian Norwood's son. So, I mean, he was also pretty unheralded out of high school. And then, but I mean, he had that connection. Derek Williams was the superstar out of high school. Justin King, who only played receiver for a year at Penn State, also just a superstar. Deion Butler, he had to kind of ride the bus. You know what I mean? Like he took the hard road. He was a walk-on. He switched positions, and then he was just a model of consistency at receiver. He was from freshman to senior year. All right, outside of Bobby Ingram, the most consistent receiver probably ever at Penn State. Like he didn't take any time to develop. He just would, they just popped him in, and he was great right away, and he was great till he left, and there was really no downtime for him.
Good pregame speech too.
Yes, Ohio State doesn't have the tradition to. Well, you can see the rest of the speech because we're a family pod here. But yeah, fiery guy apparently, and yeah, just a hard-nosed guy that was model of consistency. I don't think you could go wrong with drafting Deion Butler. I really wanted Deion Butler on my team, and he was due to be picked pretty soon. So with my next pick, I'm going to go with Bryant Johnson. So Bryant Johnson played back in the Matt Seneca, Zach Mills era, was a first-round draft pick at Penn State. He was part of the Johnson & Johnson with Larry and Tony. So there were three Johnsons back then. And he was awesome. I mean, he was the sixth player in Penn State history to catch more than 100 passes and finished second all time with 2,008 yards. That's according to Wikipedia. And then he was a first round draft pick. I mean, he only ended up with 10 touchdowns in his career at Penn State, but I think a lot of that has to do with the quarterbacks that he had. Zach Mills was the only really competent passing quarterback that he had at Penn State. So, but big physical guy, 6'3", 212. He was kind of built a little bit like Allen Robinson. I think Allen Robinson was a little more he was a little more lankier, a little more athletic than Bryant, and I think that's what ended up hurting Bryant in the NFL. Was he was big, but he wasn't that athletic, and I think that kind of was held against him in the NFL. But just a fantastic college career. Would have liked to see him in a more modern offense than he was running at Penn State. But yeah, he's going to be my pick there, and I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good value for Bryant Johnson.
Yeah, that was going to be my next pick if he slipped to me. All Big Ten guy too. Yeah, first round. Yeah, just a good solid player for that time period, right? Like, yeah. Just imagine what he would have been able to do if maybe 2005 or even 2009, maybe a little bit different. I mean, just think about maybe what that 2008 team is. That they have a Bryant Johnson. I don't know.
Yeah, because that was the one thing that those teams didn't have was they were called the Smurfs because they were all little guys. So they were really missing that big receiver, and yeah, he would have been awesome with them.
This is tough for me because this is my last pick.
Yeah, this is tough too.
This is when it really stinks because I have just names that I really like guys that I really like on here that I'm just not going to be able to choose. But I think I would really mess up if I didn't take this person. I think this is who you're going to take. So I'm going to feel pretty happy about it because I'm stealing them from you. And with my final pick, my 5th pick, I'm going to take Deshaun Hamilton.
Yeah. He was in the running.
82 catches as a freshman, which led the Big Ten. Was instrumental that year in the Ohio State game, which they almost beat Ohio State, which they almost that team ended up winning the national championship. And just continue. You talk about model of consistency. He was consistent his entire career. 214 catches, 2,842 yards, 18 touchdowns. All-time leader in catches. I feel like you got to have the all-time leader in catches on your team if you can. I mean, there's a reason why he was able to catch the ball as much as he was able to. He was open, and he was he was the quarterback's best friend. That's just the best way to put it. And to beat out a guy like Deion Butler for that is really impressive. Had 8 catches in the Big Ten championship. Just whenever you needed a big play, crossing route over the middle, Deshaun Hamilton. And I think did he end up throwing a touchdown? I think he did throw a touchdown pass, didn't he?
He did.
So just to add that to the list, good guy. Hopefully he's able to get healthy in the NFL and have himself a career. But good guy, even though Shawn yelled at him at the Taco Bell. But nonetheless, I'm very, very happy to get Deshaun Hamilton with my 5th pick. I mean, you're getting the number 1 leader in catches with my 5th pick. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, Deshaun is between Deshaun and this guy who I'm gonna pick. But yeah, Deshaun was. I mean, like you said, he just found ways to get open. He had great hands. He made the big catches. He extended drives on 3rd down. If it's 3rd and 7, Deshaun Hamilton's going to find a way to get open. And there's a reason why he was the all-time leading guy in receptions, and he's held that title for a few years now. We've had some good receivers since him. So, yeah, I don't think you can go around with him at that pick. So, my next pick, again, this was a tough one because there are going to be some great receivers that we're holding off this list. I'm going to go with Jordan Norwood. Jordan Norwood, as sure hands as I've ever seen at Penn State, and that's really saying something. It doesn't feel like he ever dropped the pass. He from the day he stepped on campus, 422 yards his freshman year, 472, 484, 637 in order. Wasn't, and it's funny, like when he got to the NFL, he looked faster than he was at Penn State. He had, up till that moment, that might have just been eclipsed this past week. He had the longest punt return in Super Bowl history. And he didn't even return punts at Penn State. It was Derek Williams. Derek Williams might be the best punt returner ever at Penn State. But that was something that Norwood really wasn't known for. And he had good speed, but he wasn't a breaker. So, and I do think his stats, I think he would have had higher receiving yards. I think all 3 of those guys that played on those teams would have had higher receiving yards than they had. But just from a hands perspective, I don't think, and I mean, either him or Dotson that had the better hands. I might go with Jordan Norwood. I just can't remember that guy ever dropping a pass. And he was good. He was just a lot like Butler in that he was good from the moment he walked in, and he was good. He stayed good until he walked out. He actually probably got a little bit better his senior year, as a lot of guys do. So I'm gonna go with Jordan Norwood for my last pick.
I totally forgot that he played with the Broncos. Like, totally was gone from my memory there. Just did not remember that for the life of me. The best Jordan Norwood memory I have was actually after his Penn State career, and he was doing like those little camp drill things they do before the NFL draft, where like they have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 guys, and they catch the jug things, and they got to run through something, and then they got to catch another pass, and they got to just twirl around.
Yeah,
all those things. I don't know why they don't do those anymore. I thought those were so fun to watch, but maybe I was just a crazy idiot. They had this one guy there, and I couldn't tell you who it was. I think it was a receiver from North Carolina who was supposed to be really good. Dude goes through, and I think the last pass was supposed to be a Brett Favre jug pass at like 40-something miles an hour. And everyone was dropping that one. It might have been faster than I don't know. But everyone was dropping that one. Even the guy from North Carolina dropped that one. Then that guy actually went through the thing and dropped another one. So like, then Jordan Norwood goes up. Dude doesn't even like strap his gloves, just has his gloves loose, just casually catches every single one of them, like unfazed at all. Like, you want to talk about like receivers and like not attacking the football and just like not. He had the most natural, like, not attacking the football ever. Like, I can't describe it to you, but like, for example, everyone attacks the football a little bit, right? Like, even some normal, not Jordan Norwood. That dude had the most gentle hands. Like, he could have caught a frog coming at him at 100 miles an hour without squishing it. I mean, just delicate hands. Also, anyway, so he did really well in that thing. Also, shout out to DJ Richter, who used to DJ. I don't know if he still DJs in State College or not, but used to DJ at Nittanyville. DJ Richter, good friends with Jordan Norwood, actually bought Jordan Norwood's Tesla off of him, and I got to drive in Jordan Norwood's Tesla when DJ Richter owned it. So really roundabout way of saying I got to drive in Jordan Norwood's Tesla.
Wow, that's a little bit of a humble brag from Mr. Listowski here.
Yeah,
driving around Jordan Norwood's car.
yeah. Jordan Norwood was not in the vehicle, but yeah, nonetheless, I really love Jordan Norwood. I mean, again, I think I fell in love with all those guys, right? AJ Wallace, a part of that group too for me, who eventually flipped over to the defensive side of things. But yeah, I think there's some romanticness to it. I think when it comes to Norwood, when it comes to Williams, when it comes to Wallace, when it comes to Deion Butler. So 100% agree, Shawn. Now we get yelled at in the comments and we get yelled at on Twitter for the guys we didn't talk about. Juravicius for me was on my list. Joe Juravicius, 94-97 guy, was borderline for me that I think had to be maybe included on here. There were some other names on Twitter that I necessarily didn't agree with maybe being a top 10 list, but I thought were really good players, but I just wouldn't have included. Derek Moy, a guy for me, another household name that I really liked, just didn't have any of the numbers to really come close to it. I really like Derek Moy. One other one I wanted to mention, Greg Garrity, probably should have been at least, again, not crazy on the numbers per se, but had a big time catch, obviously, because if you listen to our podcast, you know about that catch. Graham Zug I had on there. I think Matty Fresh was the one I recommended him. Again, numbers didn't really help it, but I was at that whiteout game against Denard Robinson's Michigan squad, and Graham Zug had a fantastic catch right in front of me for a touchdown. Freddie Scott, middle 90s, 93 catches, 1,500 yards. Really liked him too. Just couldn't fit him on there. Shawn, who else did you have that you wanted to mention?
Our very own Terry Smith, guy from the early 90s, played with OJ McDuffie, a little bit with Bobby Ingram too. So that was a fearsome receiving core back then. Another guy that had over 800 yards his senior season, KJ Hamler, speed. I mean, he almost single-handedly won us a couple of games there that were a little hairy in 2018.
App
Really
State game, he did win.
Yeah. I mean, he pulled us out of the fire in the App State game. We were dead, and he really kickstarted us. Derek Williams. I mean, one of the most important. We ranked him the #1 most important recruit ever at Penn State. So that's how highly we think of Derek Williams. I mean, the thing with Derek was he had a great freshman season. He broke his arm.
Hard to label him for me as just a wide receiver. I think is why I didn't think of him too much.
Yes. And even his freshman year, we put him at running back a lot. We used him all over the field. He was a little bit like Percy Harvin was at Florida. And I would have liked to see him with an Urban Meyer-like play caller, because I just think he would have been used in a bunch of different ways. And I mean, I don't mean to knock the coaching staff back then, but I don't think he was really used correctly. And we tried to just pigeonhole him in, I think, after that freshman year and as a receiver. And he struggled a little bit in 06 and 07. I remember looking at the games. There were some games that he didn't get a catch, and then Derek Williams was kind of invisible. So that's why I couldn't include him in the top 10. He did have an awesome senior year. And like I said, he's probably the best punt returner ever at Penn State. So that's really saying something. So Derek Williams, he's got to be an honorable mention for me. I also love the Freddie Scott pick. Love Joe Jurevicius pick for honorable mention. They're on my honorable mention list as well. Chaffee Fields.
Yes.
Some big time catches. He was really clutch player for Penn State. His most famous play was Penn State was losing to Miami down in the Orange Bowl, and Kevin Thompson throws up a prayer, and Chaffee Fields comes down with the catch and burns the cornerback. I just don't think he had the numbers to include him. Now, you have to also remember quarterbacks in the mid-90s and late 90s weren't the greatest. So I would have liked to see him with the better quarterback, because he had some wheels. And I think with the better quarterback, maybe with the more modern offense, he would have been better. But I think you got to mention Chaffee Fields too.
Yeah, if anything, I think we might get. I don't know who you would take. Maybe you could put him before a Jordan Norwood. Maybe before a Brian. It's hard to put him in there. I mean, maybe you could put him before a Deshaun Hamilton if you don't care about the stats themselves. But I could see us getting some flack for not having Fields in there. People that grew up like maybe people that are just like 5 to like 7 years older than us would definitely probably have Fields on their list. So yeah, I think that's one we might get knocked for. That's a good one. I agree with that. It's hard to fit them in, man. It's really is. It's hard to fit them in. I would probably put Fields definitely for me gets into the top 15. I don't see how you could leave him out of that. Someone on Twitter mentioned Saeed Black. No, I don't think overall no, but he had some big moments. You got to do more than big moments to get on the list.
Yeah, he was clutch, but he was another guy just disappeared for long stretches. I can't put him in the top 10. Yep,
I agree there. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that was a fun one to do. I think we need to do a offensive Swiss Army knife one on, like, not next or anything, but put that on the list, because I think it's not fair for a Derek Williams if to bottle him up as just a wide receiver, right? And honestly, like, if you want to put a Saquon Barkley on that list, I would be okay with that, right? I mean, he won the Paul Hornung Award for crying out loud. So it doesn't even have to necessarily be just offensive snaps, but kick returner, all that good stuff too.
Yeah, all-purpose. Yeah,
I think that Larry Johnson. I mean, you could, even throw McDuffie on there too. So
yeah.
I think that was, to me, the hardest thing about Derek Williams. But we have a lot of lists that we have available to us, Shawn. So no shortages of drafts to come. defense next, I guess, right? We've done an offense, and I guess we'll march over to defense. We've done defensive line. I want to save linebackers.
I do too. I think we should defensive backs.
I guess we go defensive backs, which I think is going to be pretty interesting because if there's any sort of recency bias, I think it's going to show up with defensive backs, in my opinion.
Oh yes.
So
Yeah.
let's march to the defensive backs, and we'll be back next week with defense. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I think next week's episode we're going to talk to Jay Paterno for the most of it. I think we probably don't have any extra fan questions, and we just roll right into our draft, and we'll just call that the show. So Jay Paterno, I think we're going to get him for about 45 to an hour. Then we'll do our draft. We'll call that the episode.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Definitely want to make sure we're prepared for the Jay Paterno. So,
yep. Yeah, it's
All
going to
right.
be a fun discussion.
Yeah. Well, we will see you next week on time. But for this episode, we're done. So we appreciate you very, very much for listening. If you've gotten this far, please share it with a friend. That is the number one thing you can do. Share it with another beloved Penn State football fan. We really, really appreciate it. We haven't really dropped off significantly in any capacity since the end of the season. So I was thinking like January 5th or so, and compared to now, we haven't really lost anybody. So we appreciate y'all being here. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you've liked the video. Make sure you've subscribed. If you haven't already subscribed wherever you're listening to podcasts, you're crazy. Just already have done that by now. But if you haven't, make sure you do it now. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. It just helps us. For Shawn Kane, I'm Cory Listoki. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. We will catch you next time.